I was born with medicine blood coursing through my veins, blood that could bring the dead back to life and mend shattered bones. For 49 days and nights, I had nursed my husband, the general, back from death's door with drops of my own life essence, warming his severed limbs back to wholeness. Finally, on that 49th morning, his limbs had healed completely and consciousness returned to him. Yet, when he opened his eyes and saw me, the first person before him, he called out another woman's name. If not for Clara's nightly melodies calling me back, Sebastian said, his voice still weak but certain, I would never have survived to see this day. Adelaide, he continued, looking at me with eyes that held no warmth, you've occupied her rightful place for 5 years. I've given you a child as compensation. It is time to step aside and let her take her proper position as my wife. I smiled and agreed gracefully, as I always had. Without a word of protest, I quietly gathered my belongings and those of my son, taking his small hand as we prepared to leave this place that had never truly been home. My little boy looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. Mother, father has finally awakened. Will he play with Oliver now? I knelt down beside him, gently brushing the crumbs from a pastry off his lips. With the tenderest smile I could manage, I said, Oliver, my dear one, we don't need him anymore. Mother will find you a new father. Would you like that? Will the new father be like the heroes in storybooks, very tall and strong? I nodded, squeezing his small hand tighter in mine, drawing strength from his innocent trust. Sebastian's voice carried a note of panic I had never heard before. Adelaide, where are you taking my son? Beside him, Clara, that delicate creature, leaned against his shoulder with practiced grace, her voice soft as silk. Sebastian, perhaps she is simply upset that you've been distant. Please don't lose your temper with her. How perfectly she played her part. With just one word calling me sister, she had already claimed the position that should have been mine alone. I had been his wife for 5 years. Yet she dared assume authority over me with such casual audacity. I paused but didn't turn around. Sebastian, when you opened your eyes, it was my face you saw first. When you lay unconscious all those nights, it was I who kept vigil at your bedside. The one who bathed your fevered body, administered your medicines, and cleaned away your unfortunate accidents. That was also me. Now you tell me it was her melodies that brought you back to life. His response was as cold as winter frost. And what of it? Everything you've described was merely a wife's duty, nothing more. But Clara is different. She saved my life once. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the dismissive tone of someone granting charity. Adelaide, if you feel slighted, take whatever treasures from the estate you fancy as compensation for your services. Finally, I could bear no more. I turned to face him with a smile that held no warmth. That won't be necessary, Sebastian. I find everything in this house rather tainted, taking Oliver's hand firmly in mine. I walked away from that place without another moment's hesitation, leaving behind the gilded cage that had held me captive for 5 years. Clara's voice followed me, pitched just loudly enough for all to hear. Sister has always been from merchant stock. I suppose such a narrow perspective to turn her nose up at the general's generous offer. Indeed, my perspective was quite narrow, too narrow to appreciate the rusty trinkets he called wealth. For the entire estate, including Sebastian's very life, had been sustained by my gold and my blood. I settled with Oliver in a beautiful estate on the outskirts of the capital. The gardens were filled with pavilions and meandering streams, where birdsong filled the air, a paradise compared to the sterile coldness of Sebastian's mansion. Mother, will we live here forever? It is so beautiful. Oliver ran through the courtyards with more joy than I had seen in years. My faithful servant, Nurse Margaret, watched him with troubled eyes. My lady, we've simply walked away. What about the general? He won't perish, I interrupted quietly. Sebastian's limbs had been restored through my blood, and as long as I lived, they would remain whole. But my medicine blood had a peculiar demanding nature. Once the treatment began, it could never cease. Every 7 days, he required my blood, or the newly grown flesh would begin to rot away, inch by agonizing inch, until nothing remained but putrid decay. By my calculations, he had 3 days remaining. I was curious to see whether Clara's precious melodies could ease the bone-deep agony that would soon consume him. As if summoned by my thoughts, commotion erupted outside the estate walls. A servant hurried to inform me that General Sebastian had surrounded the property with his men. I frowned, gathering Oliver in my arms as we went to face this unwelcome intrusion. Sebastian sat mounted on his warhorse, still wearing his military regalia, looking down at me with imperious authority. Behind him, Clara peeked from her carriage window, her eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. "Adelaide Morrison," he called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "How dare you abduct a child of the Sebastian family bloodline?" He assumed I had nowhere else to turn, that I would retreat to my family home like a beaten dog. But he had forgotten that my family was long gone. More importantly, he had no idea that throughout the capital, my properties and wealth far exceeded his empty title and crumbling estate. "General Sebastian speaks in jest," I replied, meeting his cold gaze steadily. "Oliver is my son. I may take him wherever I choose." "Insolent woman," he thundered. "You are nothing more than a bride we purchased." His words were cut short by an arrow that whistled past his cheek, embedding itself deep in the wooden pillar behind him. The shaft vibrated with deadly precision. Sebastian's face went white as parchment. A column of the Emperor's elite guard approached at full gallop, led by a man in dark robes whose stern features could have been carved from granite. He dismounted with fluid grace. "By His Imperial Majesty's command, Lady Adelaide Morrison, Countess of Westfield, is summoned to appear before the throne immediately." The blood drained from Sebastian's face. Clara's mouth fell open in shock. In their stunned silence, I smoothed my robes and entrusted Oliver to nurse Margaret's care. Then I acknowledged the dark-robed man with a respectful nod. "Commander Garrett, I am grateful for your assistance." Garrett Lancaster, the Emperor's most trusted captain of the guard, and as it happened, my most valuable ally. As I walked past Sebastian, I didn't spare him so much as a glance. He reached out desperately, grasping my wrist. "Adelaide, what in heaven's name is happening? What do you mean, Countess?" I gently freed my arm, my voice distant and formal. "General, we no longer have any connection to one another." In the Imperial Palace's study chamber, the young Emperor rose hastily when I entered. "Countess, thank goodness you've come. Mother is, Your Majesty, please remain calm," I soothed. "Take me to see the Empress Dowager." The Palace of Eternal Joy reeked of medicinal herbs and approaching death. The Empress Dowager lay upon her bed, her complexion gray as ash, her breathing shallow and labored. Garrett spoke quietly behind me. "Every physician in the palace has declared her condition hopeless." I approached the bedside and gently took the Empress Dowager's wrist. A thin thread of blood seeped from my fingertip, following her pulse as it entered her system. Within moments, color began returning to her ashen features. A transformation visible to the naked eye. The Emperor gasped in wonder. "Countess, you truly possess divine gifts." I withdrew my hand, noting how my own complexion had paled. "Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager has been poisoned, slowly, deliberately. But it is quite treatable. I'll prepare a prescription. If administered properly for 7 days, she will recover completely." I recognized this particular toxin, one of my own secret formulations called 7 Sorrows Powder. The victim's life force would gradually ebb away, mimicking natural aging so perfectly that even the most skilled physicians would find nothing suspicious. In all the world, perhaps 3 people possessed the knowledge to create such a poison. Clara, as the Medicine Valley Master's final disciple, was certainly among them. How very interesting this was becoming. I wrote out the prescription and handed it to Garrett. Commander, the preparation of this medicine must not be entrusted to anyone else. He accepted it solemnly, his dark eyes studying me with newfound respect. You have my word, Countess. As I departed the Palace of Eternal Joy, the Emperor personally escorted me to the gates. Countess, your service will be richly rewarded. Your Majesty is too kind. Being able to serve the crown is my duty and honor. When I returned to my estate, Oliver was already asleep. Nurse Margaret brought me ginseng tea, her weathered face creased with worry. My lady, you look terribly pale. I waved away her concern, having no appetite for food or drink. The gift of medicine blood could heal others, but each use consumed a portion of my own life force. When I had saved Sebastian, I had nearly sacrificed half my remaining years. Today's treatment for the Empress Dowager had drained me further still. Leaning against the silk cushions, gazing at the moon through the window, I felt truly weary for the first time in years. What had I been seeking all this time? What had driven me through such suffering? A servant interrupted my brooding. My lady, General Sebastian has been waiting outside our gates for 2 hours, requesting an audience. I laughed bitterly. Let him wait. If he dares force his way in, have the guards break his legs. After all, hadn't he claimed that severed limbs could grow back? I was curious to see how he would manage such a feat without my blood to sustain the healing. Sebastian waited through the entire night. At dawn, he still hadn't seen me, but a palace messenger arrived with an imperial decree. General Sebastian Morrison, by order of His Imperial Majesty, your negligence has allowed the Empress Dowager to be poisoned, nearly resulting in catastrophe. Effective immediately. You are stripped of your rank and military authority. You will remain confined to your estate for reflection on your failures. Sebastian collapsed to his knees as though struck by lightning. He couldn't comprehend how, in a single night, he had fallen from celebrated war hero to disgraced prisoner. The architect of his destruction was the woman he had dismissed so carelessly, the wife he had believed he could manipulate at will. When news reached me, I was flying kites with Oliver in our garden. Mother, look how high it soars, he exclaimed joyfully. I smiled, wiping perspiration from his small nose. Oliver is quite skillful. Nurse Margaret sighed nearby. My lady, your strategy was truly comprehensive. I prefer thorough. I corrected her. I hadn't merely removed the foundation of his power. I intended to destroy everything he held dear, ensuring he could never rise again. With Sebastian's disgrace, Clara's comfortable position evaporated as well. Without the protection of a general's title, without Sebastian's influence, a woman of mysterious origins found herself completely defenseless in the capital. I heard she had sold all her jewelry just to rent a modest dwelling in the city's poorest quarter. More delicious still, Sebastian's legs had begun to ache. At first, it was merely a dull throb, but soon it became an excruciating bone-deep agony that gave him no peace day or night. Multiple physicians examined him, but none could identify the cause. They could only conclude that old battle wounds had somehow returned, defying all medical explanation. Finally, Sebastian remembered me. He began sending desperate messages to my estate, gifts of gold, silver, precious stones, and the finest silks, piling them in my entrance hall. I ordered everything thrown back into the street. Tell Sebastian Morrison that his offerings bring bad luck to my household. When his gifts were rejected, he sent Clara to plead on his behalf. She knelt outside my gates, weeping like a tragic heroine from a popular romance novel. Please, Countess, have mercy on Sebastian. The pain is destroying him. I'll do anything, be your servant, your slave, if only you'll help him. Passers-by gathered to watch, their voices carrying cruel gossip. Isn't that the woman who tried to steal another's husband? Yes. That is her. I heard the general cast aside his lawful wife just for this creature. Now she comes crawling back for help. Shameless. Clara's face flushed with humiliation, but she remained on her knees, refusing to leave. I sent Nurse Margaret with a message. My lady says she might consider helping Sebastian Morrison in exchange for your life. Clara's weeping stopped abruptly. She stared up at my estate with disbelief and growing horror. I knew she would refuse. Selfish creatures like her valued their own lives above all others, no matter how prettily they spoke of love and sacrifice. Sure enough, she stumbled to her feet and fled, casting one last venomous look at my gates. I smiled coldly. The game was just beginning. Sebastian's legs would have begun their true decay, the sensation of flesh peeling from bone, a torture that could break the strongest will. That is when Commander Garrett arrived with imperial rewards and a message from the palace. The Empress Dowager says those despicable creatures are entirely at your disposal, Countess. I looked at him thoughtfully, then smiled. Commander, would you like to witness an entertaining performance? His eyebrows rose slightly, intrigue flickering in his dark eyes. I would be delighted to hear more. I brought Garrett to Sebastian's former mansion. The once proud estate now stood neglected, its golden nameplate tarnished and peeling. Servants led us to Sebastian's bedchamber, where the smell of decay and corruption overwhelmed our senses. Garrett's expression remained impassive, though I noticed his slight frown of distaste. I entered as though the stench didn't affect me at all. Sebastian lay on the bed. A shadow of his former self where was the mighty general's commanding presence now. His legs were wrapped in blood-stained bandages, though dark red stains had already seeped through the white cloth. Clara sat beside him like a devoted nurse. But when she saw me, she rushed forward with desperate fury. Adelaide Morrison, you poisonous witch! What have you done to Sebastian? I stepped aside, avoiding her clumsy attack, my voice ice cold. What have I done? I saved his life, then was kicked aside like refuse. Does that count, you? Clara sputtered, speechless with rage. Sebastian stirred on the bed. Releasing a painful moan, he struggled to open his eyes, and when he saw me, desperate hope blazed in his clouded gaze. Adelaide, save me. I know I was wrong. His voice was hoarse and cracked, like a broken bellows wheezing its last breath. Save you. I walked slowly to his bedside, looking down at him with cold authority. Sebastian Morrison, what makes you think I would lift a finger to help you? I gave you a child, he managed weakly. I laughed until tears nearly sprang to my eyes. A child. Sebastian Morrison, do you have any idea that giving birth to Oliver nearly killed me? Do you know that while I carried him, during your most crucial military campaign, I suffered in silence rather than distract you with my troubles? Do you know that when he was born, while you were commanding troops on distant battlefields, I labored alone for 3 days and nights? None of this mattered to you, did it? You only knew that your precious Clara had called you back with her nightly melodies, that she alone deserved credit for your survival. Sebastian's face went white as bone, his lips trembling soundlessly. Clara, seeing his condition worsen, quickly interjected, Sebastian had no way of knowing. You deliberately kept everything secret, manipulating him through guilt. The sharp crack of my palm against her cheek echoed through the chamber. What gives you the right to speak here, you shameless creature? Clara staggered, clutching her face in shock. I ignored her completely, drawing an ornate dagger from my sleeve. The blade gleamed coldly in the candlelight, rolling up my sleeve to expose my pale wrist. I watched Sebastian's eyes brighten with desperate hunger. He recognized his salvation. I positioned the dagger against my skin but didn't cut. Looking directly at him, I spoke each word deliberately. Sebastian Morrison, do you want to live? He nodded frantically. If you want to live, cast her aside, then kneel before me and beg for my mercy. My words weren't loud, but they struck the room like thunder. Clara went white as death, screaming, "Adelaide Morrison, you are dreaming." Sebastian stared at the dagger against my wrist, his eyes filled with internal torment. One path led to the woman he claimed to love, the other to his survival. I waited patiently, content to let him struggle with his choice. Time passed slowly, the stench of decay growing stronger. Sebastian's breathing became more labored, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Finally, like a man possessed, he turned to Clara with wild desperation. "Get out! I want you gone!" Clara stood frozen, devastated. "Sebastian, you!" I said, "Get out! Are you deaf?" He summoned his remaining strength to roar. "I don't want to die. I won't die." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she backed away, then turned and fled from the room. Now only 3 of us remained. I looked at Sebastian with satisfaction. Then, to Garrett's amazement, I raised the dagger toward Sebastian's chest instead of my own wrist. "Did you really think I would save you?" I leaned close to his ear, my voice soft as a lover's whisper. "My blood can heal the dead and mend broken bones, but it can also dissolve bone into liquid and kill without leaving a trace. Sebastian Morrison, enjoy what little time you have left." I straightened, tucking the dagger back into my sleeve, and walked away without looking back. Behind me, Sebastian's screams of absolute despair echoed through the chamber. In our carriage afterward, Garrett spoke suddenly. "You planned all of this from the beginning." I didn't deny it. "I harm no one who doesn't harm me first." And his legs. "I engineered that," I admitted freely. "When I healed him, I planted a catalyst in his bloodstream. Only my blood could suppress it. Once cut off from my blood, the catalyst would activate, consuming his flesh until nothing remained but agony and death." The carriage fell silent for a long moment. "The most venomous creature is a woman scorned," he finally murmured. I raised an eyebrow. "Are you insulting me, Commander?" He shook his head, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Not at all. I am praising you. Mercy to one's enemies is cruelty to oneself. You acted wisely, Countess." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Very wisely indeed." I stared at him in surprise. I had expected disgust, perhaps fear, the reaction of someone confronted with a monster. He was the first person to understand and approve of my actions. A strange warmth spread through my chest. When we returned to my estate, I fell gravely ill. The depletion of my life force, combined with days of emotional stress, finally overwhelmed my body's defenses. I remained unconscious for 3 days and nights, lost in dreams of past and present. I dreamed of my early days in Medicine Valley, carefree and innocent, until I met Sebastian, who had come seeking rare medicines. He was magnificent then, confident, handsome, the fantasy of every woman in the capital. I fell in love at first sight. To marry him, I defied my master, stole forbidden medicines, and abandoned everything I had known. I thought I was marrying for love. But 5 years of marriage brought only empty chambers and cold indifference. His heart had always belonged to someone else, a woman named Clara. When I awoke, Garrett was sitting beside my bed, seeing me conscious. Relief flickered in his dark eyes. "You are awake." His voice was rough with exhaustion, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting he hadn't rested in days. "How long was I unconscious?" 3 days. "The physician said you suffered from internal injuries caused by emotional turmoil and physical depletion. You need complete rest." He offered me a cup of warm water. As I reached for it, our fingers brushed accidentally. His hands were wonderfully warm. "Thank you, Commander. Call me Garrett," he said, watching me with focused intensity. "Adelaide." My heart skipped a beat. News of Sebastian's death reached us after my recovery. They said he died horribly, his entire body dissolving into putrid liquid, not even bones remaining. Clara had vanished completely. Some claimed she had gone mad. Others believed Sebastian's enemies had taken her. Either way, both villains had received their just punishment. Yet I felt no satisfaction, only a strange emptiness. With my revenge complete, I wasn't sure what came next. Then the palace sent another imperial decree. The Empress Dowager had adopted me as her daughter, granting me the title Princess of Tranquil Joy, and arranged my marriage to Commander Garrett Lancaster. I held the decree, speechless. Nurse Margaret wept tears of joy nearby. "My lady, your suffering has finally ended." Through the window, I could see Garrett standing beneath the flowering trees, dressed in his characteristic dark robes. When he noticed my gaze, he smiled, an expression like warm spring sunshine that instantly dispelled the shadows in my heart. "Was this your idea or the Empress Dowager's?" He approached and gently took my hand. "It was my decision." He bent to press a soft kiss against my knuckles. "Adelaide, I've been waiting for this moment for 10 years. I stared at him in shock. 10 years ago, at Medicine Valley on the southern mountains, he said slowly. You guided me down the mountain path, warning me of dangerous terrain, and gave me a bottle of healing medicine you had prepared yourself. You said, "Young master, the world is treacherous. Please be careful." The memory returned clearly now. 10 years ago, a severely wounded young man had indeed come to the valley seeking treatment. He was silent and stern, covered in injuries but never uttering a complaint. My master had saved his life. Feeling sorry for him, I had given him medicine before he left. I never imagined that young man was Garrett. I've kept that bottle all these years. He produced a small ceramic vial from his robes, the very one I had given him long ago. Adelaide, I know you've been hurt deeply and find it difficult to trust again, but I will spend my lifetime proving my devotion to you. Will you marry me? His eyes held a tenderness and determination I had never encountered before. My own eyes filled with tears. While I had been chasing after someone who would never love me, a star had been quietly watching over me for an entire decade. Our wedding was a magnificent affair. The Empress Dowager personally oversaw the arrangements, red silk stretching for miles, the envy of the entire capital. On our wedding day, Oliver wore festive red robes and held my hand, looking up with innocent curiosity. Mother, will my new father always stay with us? I smiled. Stroking his hair, always. Garrett appeared behind us, sweeping Oliver into his arms. Father will play with Oliver every single day. How does that sound? Oliver threw his arms around Garrett's neck, planting a kiss on his cheek. Wonderful, watching them together. Father and son so naturally affectionate, filled my heart with unprecedented warmth. On our wedding night, Garrett removed my veil, his eyes soft with adoration. Adelaide, you are beautiful beyond words. I lowered my head shyly. He took my hands in his, speaking earnestly. Adelaide, there is something I must tell you. What is it? Your medicine blood condition isn't incurable. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? Medicine Valley possessed a lost manual called the Reverse Blood Scripture. Practicing its techniques could transform your medicine blood into ordinary blood, freeing you from its burden forever. But this scripture disappeared a century ago when Medicine Valley burned. I gripped his hands excitedly. How could you possibly know about this? His expression grew complex. Because I was the sole survivor of that fire. I felt as though I'd been struck by lightning. You are from Medicine Valley. He nodded. My true family name is Chen. I was the Medicine Valley Master's grandson. When the fire came, 120 members of my family perished. Only I escaped. A kind man rescued me and raised me as his son, giving me a new name and identity. I joined the Imperial Guard with one purpose, to someday uncover the truth and avenge my family. The one who set that fire was Clara's master, a Medicine Valley traitor called the Dark Mystic. Now I understood why Clara knew the Seven Sorrows powder formula, and why Garrett had shown me such special attention. We had been connected by fate long before we realized it. "Where is the dark mystic now?" I asked urgently. "He has hidden himself in the Western demon cult, becoming their leader," Garrett replied. "I've been investigating secretly for years, gathering evidence of his crimes. He not only destroyed my entire family, but has been plotting rebellion in collaboration with foreign enemies." Looking at him, my heart overflowed with conflicting emotions. He had carried such tremendous pain and hatred, yet had never shown me anything but warmth and comfort. "Garrett, let me help you," I said, squeezing his hands tightly. "Whatever dangers await, I'll face them with you." He drew me into his embrace, his chin resting atop my head. "Having you by my side is worth everything else in the world." The next morning, we appeared before the Emperor together, reporting everything we had discovered. The Emperor flew into a rage, immediately ordering Garrett to lead 100,000 troops against the Western demon cult. I would accompany the army as a military physician. Before our departure, I entrusted Oliver to the Empress Dowager's care. She held Oliver close, grasping my hand with motherly concern. "Adelaide, Garrett, be extremely careful on this mission. Oliver and I will wait here in the capital for your triumphant return." I nodded solemnly. For Oliver's sake, for Garrett's sake, for my own future, I had to obtain the reverse blood scripture. I refused to remain a helpless vessel for others to exploit. I wanted to be an ordinary woman, growing old beside the man I loved. Our army marched westward, reaching the borders of the demon cult's territory. The cult had fortified themselves atop treacherous mountain peaks, nearly impossible to assault directly. Rather than launching an immediate attack, Garrett established a base camp, creating a strategic standoff. I knew he was waiting for the perfect opportunity. That night, he slipped into my tent. "Tomorrow, I'll lead an elite strike force against the cult's rear mountain stronghold. That area serves as the Dark Mystic's private retreat and is the most likely location for the reverse blood scripture. I've arranged for our main force to create a diversionary assault, drawing away their primary defenses. But this mission will be extremely dangerous. You should." "I am coming with you," I interrupted. "Absolutely not." His refusal was immediate. "It is far too risky." I met his gaze steadily. "Garrett, the Dark Mystic specializes in poison techniques. No one in our army can counter his methods except me. Besides, the reverse blood scripture is crucial to my future. I must retrieve it personally." Garrett fell silent, knowing I spoke the truth. Finally, he relented. "Very well, but you must promise to stay close to me at all times, not one step away." "I promise." Before dawn the next morning, Garrett led me and 100 elite soldiers up the treacherous rear mountain approach. The cult's defenses were indeed lighter here, as expected. We moved like shadows through the darkness, quickly locating the Dark Mystic's meditation chamber. Only 2 guards stood watch outside the stone chamber. Garrett signaled silently, and his men eliminated the sentries without a sound. We pushed open the heavy door and entered. The chamber was vast, dominated by a massive alchemical furnace at its center. An elderly man with wild white hair sat cross-legged before the furnace, deep in meditation. This had to be the Dark Mystic. Garrett didn't hesitate, drawing his sword and thrusting toward the man's heart. The Dark Mystic's eyes snapped open, burning with malevolent light. His body twisted impossibly, avoiding the fatal strike. "A surviving Chen family whelp. I thought you were all dead." His voice sounded like rusted metal scraping against stone. "Old demon, your time has come," Garrett roared, engaging him in fierce combat. While they fought, I searched frantically through the chamber for the reverse blood scripture. Countless shelves lined the walls, filled with medical texts and poison manuals. I examined them one by one, my heart racing with urgency. Suddenly, in an inconspicuous corner, I discovered a hidden compartment. Inside lay a yellowed ancient manual with reverse blood scripture, written clearly on its cover. My heart leaped with triumph, but an intense sense of danger suddenly overwhelmed me. I instinctively rolled backward as a poisoned silver needle whistled past my head, embedding itself in the wall behind me. The wall immediately began dissolving where the needle struck. Clara emerged from the shadows, holding a silver crossbow and wearing a twisted smile of hatred. Adelaide Morrison. What a pleasant reunion. I hadn't expected to find her here. You didn't go mad after all. Mad hardly, she laughed coldly. I've been waiting for exactly this moment, the chance to tear you apart piece by piece. My master anticipated your arrival and prepared a perfect trap. As she spoke, black-clad figures poured from every direction. Surrounding us, the dark mystic, still fighting Garrett, suddenly released a sinister laugh. Chen family boy, today marks your death. He produced a black vial from his robes, uncorked it, and colorless, odorless smoke filled the chamber. One by one, Garrett's elite soldiers collapsed. Garrett's face went pale as he held his breath desperately. It is muscle-softening powder, I cried in warning. My heart sank. This was the dark mystic's signature poison. Within 1 hour, victims would lose all martial abilities and become helpless. Adelaide, your precious medicine blood is supposed to be so powerful. Why don't you cure this? Clara shrieked with delight. My face went white as I clutched the reverse blood scripture protectively. I couldn't neutralize this particular poison, unless... I looked toward Garrett, my expression resolute. Garrett, catch. With all my strength, I hurled the manual toward him. Then I pulled the golden hairpin from my hair and drove it toward my own heart without hesitation. No, Garrett screamed in anguish, but it was too late. The hairpin pierced my chest, and blood immediately stained my robes. Excruciating pain shot through me, but I smiled through it. Using my heart's blood as a catalyst could neutralize any poison in existence. This was Medicine Valley's ultimate secret, and my final trump card. As my blood flowed, the toxic fumes gradually cleared. The fallen soldiers began stirring back to consciousness. Clara and the dark mystic stood frozen in disbelief. They couldn't comprehend how I would use such desperate measures to turn the tide. Attack. Garrett roared, his eyes blazing with murderous fury. He fought like an avenging demon, unstoppable in his rage. The soldiers, inspired by his example, clashed fiercely with the cult members. I leaned against the wall, feeling my life ebbing away drop by drop. I watched Garrett, wanting to memorize his image for whatever came next. Suddenly, Clara raised her crossbow, aiming at Garrett as he battled desperately. Her face contorted with suicidal madness. Garrett Lancaster, die with us. I summoned my last remaining strength and threw myself between them, shielding Garrett with my body. The poisoned bolt buried itself deep in my back. Adelaide, Garrett whirled around, seeing me collapse, and released a howl of absolute despair. He beheaded Clara with a single stroke, then rushed to gather me in his arms. Adelaide, why were you so foolish? His warm tears fell upon my face. I tried to lift my hand to wipe them away but couldn't find the strength. Garrett, don't cry. I am happy to die for you. Take care of Oliver from now on. My voice grew weaker and weaker. The world around me became increasingly blurred. Finally, I saw only him holding me, howling at the heavens in grief. Garrett, I am sorry. In this life, I may have broken my promise to you. If there is another life, I swear to be your most beautiful bride. I thought death was certain, but when I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in a warm, comfortable bed. Outside the window were familiar gardens and pavilions, filled with birdsong. This was our estate in the capital. My lady, you are awake. Nurse Margaret entered with medicine, tears of relief streaming down her face. I stared at her in confusion. I am not dead. Not dead. My lady, you are blessed by heaven itself. How could you die? She said through happy tears. The general saved you. He used the reverse blood scripture to heal you. I sat up abruptly, causing sharp pain in my chest wound. Where is Garrett? How is he? The general is. Nurse Margaret's expression grew strange. He is in the ancestral hall, ignoring my injuries. I threw on a robe and hurried to the family shrine. There I found Garrett, dressed in white mourning robes, kneeling quietly before the Chen family memorial tablets. His silhouette appeared desolate and lonely. Hearing my footsteps, he slowly turned around. When our eyes met, he smiled a pale, powerless expression. Adelaide, you are awake. I rushed to his side, only then noticing that his hair had turned completely white. Garrett, your hair, it doesn't matter. He reached toward my face, but stopped mid-gesture. The reverse blood scripture requires life force in exchange for life force. Blood for blood. I traded 30 years of my lifespan and all my martial cultivation to save your life and completely purge the medicine blood from your system. From now on, you are simply Adelaide, no longer bound to be anyone's medicine vessel. My tears burst forth uncontrollably. You fool, you absolute fool. I threw myself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He gently stroked my back, his voice tender. Not foolish at all. For you, anything is worthwhile. He paused, then continued. Adelaide, the dark mystic is dead, and the demon cult has been destroyed. My family's revenge is complete. But I've lost all my abilities and have few years remaining. I can no longer protect you properly. I've already resigned my position and requested an imperial decree of divorce. In the future, take Oliver and find a good man to marry. He produced a divorce document from his robes and placed it before me. I looked at the divorce papers, then at his silver hair, and began to laugh. I laughed until I cried even harder. I snatched the document and tore it to shreds before his eyes. Garrett Lancaster, listen carefully. I cupped his face in my hand, speaking each word distinctly. In this lifetime, you belong to me living or dead. If you want to abandon me, you'll have to die first. I brought Garrett to the southern mountains, back to the ruins of Medicine Valley. The mountain air was pure and clean, isolated from worldly concerns, perfect for recovery and healing. I devoted all my medical knowledge to restoring his health. His physical condition improved day by day, though his white hair would never return to black. I didn't mind. To me, he was the most beloved man in the world, regardless of his appearance. Oliver joined us from the capital. The child was remarkably understanding, never making trouble, and even learned to massage Garrett's shoulders and back. Our family of 3 lived simply but contentedly. As I dried medicinal herbs in the courtyard, Garrett embraced me from behind. Adelaide, marry me. I froze in surprise. He produced an intricately carved wooden hairpin from his robes. I have nothing to offer you now, no grand wedding procession, no phoenix crown or ceremonial robes, only this, which I carved with my own hands. Will you marry me again? I turned in his arms, seeing hope and uncertainty in his eyes, and smiled as I nodded. Yes, I will. Our second wedding was beautifully simple. No guests. No banquet. Just ceremonial bows to heaven and earth, to our ancestors. Oliver served as our witness. During the final bow between husband and wife, I looked into Garrett's eyes and whispered, "Husband, please guide me through the rest of our lives." He smiled back, his eyes filled with starlight. "Wife, please guide me through the rest of our lives." On our wedding night, we held each other close. I rested my head on his arm, listening to his steady heartbeat, feeling safer than ever before. I had once believed my life was an endless debt that could never be repaid. Until I met him, I hadn't understood that all my suffering was simply leading me to this moment. He was the light in my darkness, my only salvation. Garrett. Yes, I love you. And I love only you, Adelaide, for all my remaining days. Outside our window, moonlight flowed like water. This time, it truly would be forever.